Wilderness Alliance and the team at Bold Bison for the invitation to join you today. And I'm hoping to inject a dose of optimism here in all the wonkiness around federal funding to talk about how we can widen the imagination and think about a variety of different colors of money for federal funding to really move the needle on large scale landscape level conservation. So I'm going to share my screen and a few slides here and tell you a little bit about myself and our work at Refocus Partners. Refocus is a design and finance firm, and we are a team of renegade designers who have experience working at all levels of government to think creatively about how to use federal, state, and local resources for nature-based projects that create meaningful community-centered impact, moving shovels and money to communities that are rarely first in line for either. I understand that all of you have been hearing quite a bit from federal officials and others about the once-in-a-generation opportunity that we have ahead of us. I really cannot overstate how important this next 3 to 5 years is. We have the opportunity to invest the most public funding since Franklin Roosevelt in improving our infrastructure, our communities, and our ecosystems. The one thing I want to point out to you on this particular slide, among all of these colors of money, you won't see conservation labeled separately. You can see on the far right side, there's a little blip for resiliency, there's some for water. I don't want you to be discouraged by that. Instead, I'd like you to look at all these colors of money as an opportunity for the conservation community to start speaking transportation, to think about where broadband and conservation connect, and to really leverage all of these resources to advance your conservation priorities and projects. So how do you do that? One challenge that folks don't often talk about, but is a core part of our work at Refocus, is that conservation projects, like resilient infrastructure, often when you do them well, success is something that doesn't happen. I'm going to repeat that. Success is something that doesn't happen when we are more effective in our conservation goals and our resilience goals. What that means is the storm hits, but the community isn't devastated. When you're in government in your first year, that's applauded. In the second year, your funding is clearly cut because you no longer need it. And in the third year, your staff go away. So it requires real creativity to think about how you mobilize money for these types of projects and make sure that funding is durable over time, that it doesn't just become a one and done exercise. So our team at Refocus has, over the years, over the last decade, developed 4 strategies that we think hold real promise for all of the money that's come out since the COVID relief bills, through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And the way that we look at finding different colors of money and aligning them is by asking, who are the champions? Who's losing money today that has the real incentive to move projects forward? How do we align benefits in non-traditional ways? How do we pull together partners across sectors and genuinely create multi-benefit projects? And lastly, how do we really think about financial value when we're looking at nature-based solutions? I'm going to walk through each of these 4 strategies that we use, and I want you all to listen for how you can apply this in your network in the Chicago area, in the wider Great Lakes region, and really think about where this fits with your work, how you can zoom out, how you can bring together different partners. One of the very first things that our team does when we are starting a new landscape scale project is we will look and say, who loses money if this doesn't happen? In the case of transit systems and heat, sometimes that's the transit authority itself. Fewer trains run and fewer riders are out when it's very hot out. In the case of coastal projects or river and lake projects, We look at what happens to existing assets. The image on your right is from a master plan for the city of Hayward for the shoreline along San Francisco Bay. Hayward is an older industrial city. Many of you will recognize some of the things that are on this. And the city of Hayward is facing significant disruption from storms and sea level rise. And it's to existing assets, to railways, to landfills. So there's some really clear answers to who loses money if the shoreline is not protected. What that enabled us to do is work with a team of partners led by the landscape architecture firm Scape to really bring together a full shoreline master plan with several $100 million worth of projects that identified whole new stakeholders and looked at problems in new ways. Like, if we do this right, do we save dredging costs for folks in critical supply chains? So I would encourage you all, I know that in the field of conservation, like climate resilience, many of the things that all of us are motivated to do are about the future. But that doesn't mean there's no value today. So think about who benefits today and who can join your cause to move a large project forward. In the case of federal funding, that also might reveal who could be a lead applicant if it's not your organization itself. The second example I'd like to give is when you think about conservation, oftentimes many folks in the community are leading with conservation benefits. But if you think about conservation as the wagon that you're trying to hitch to a bigger horse, often there are huge projects where you can integrate green infrastructure, resilience benefits, nature-based solutions. This particular project on the right is an example from our work at Refocus in the city of Hoboken. Hoboken is a tiny postage stamp of a city across the river from Manhattan in New Jersey. And it was under 12 feet of water after Hurricane Sandy. What we were able to do is take a 6-acre abandoned industrial site, contaminated site, and redesign it and use parking fees to help pay for green infrastructure and separating the water system, the sewer system from the water system. And this project is currently under construction. It's a $100 million project. And the city was able to move forward on this project by zooming out, by looking at where green infrastructure could motivate a whole other set of infrastructure investments. This is within reach for all of you too. It takes coordination. It's certainly not simple, but it can deliver massive benefits for communities and for the environment. The third thing our team does to really keep our chin up and be inspired when we're looking at big picture federal funding and infrastructure is we'll look for where something can get cheaper across in a different sector. Oftentimes, one of the most overlooked things about nature-based solutions is that they reduce costs. And you have to be really specific, just like in the first example I gave. Who are you reducing costs for? Not general benefits, but specific benefits. On one particular project, we had the privilege of working with the city of El Paso, which suffers from massive flash floods that are getting worse due to climate change. We were able to work with a city that was trying to put in multiple parks and green stormwater infrastructure investments, but really running into opposition from their own maintenance department. What we did is we came in, worked with the city, and helped them identify where strategically placed investments in conservation and nature could actually reduce maintenance costs by reducing how often roads were washed away, how often workers had to be out in extreme storms doing repairs, and enabling the city itself to say, we could actually make our assets last longer. Again, this is not something exclusive to El Paso. It's available to any region that's able to zoom out, coordinate more effectively across organizations, and deliver immediate benefits for folks who are facing increasing costs due to climate change. The last example I'll give from our work is we spend a lot of time thinking about how to connect physical risk, like flooding, to financial risk, like insurance company losses. This is an area where there is tremendous opportunity for organizations that are thinking at the landscape scale. And I would say in your region, all of you have a whole new frontier here, where you can look at how to mobilize nature to be able to create financial value. In the case of landscape scale conservation, where you're holding water, for example, upstream and preventing downstream flooding, you can look for where you are actually preventing public sector and private sector losses. Again, coming back to who loses money when we don't do this right. We're at an absolute inflection point for how we think about infrastructure. And I think our opportunity is such that organizations like all of yours that have come together for this Congress can really reset how the federal government engages and delivers value on the ground for communities and for ecosystems. We use this graphic a lot because, as optimistic as I am about the work that we do in conservation, in resilience, and infrastructure design and finance, it takes a lot of coordination. It takes a great deal of patience and alignment. You can see on the left of this slide, community needs and priorities come in all different shapes and sizes. They aren't more or less important than the others, but they don't fit neatly often in government and department agency silos. And they fit even less neatly into public and private finance, which needs to look more like a layer cake. Being able to translate community needs and priorities into fundable projects is both the challenge and the opportunity that we have ahead of us. I'm incredibly encouraged by how all of you have come together in this Congress. And I think the potential is tremendous to be able to do larger and more impactful projects than we've ever done before. So my call to all of you is not to focus on funding requirements or specific opportunities, but to zoom out, to think big. How will you align yourselves to use this money to reshape the landscapes that you have around you and to create more value for all of the communities you serve and for your local governments and companies? With that, I'd like to wrap and say thank you so much for having me here. I'm so pleased to be able to join you from San Diego, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion with all of you later this afternoon. Thank you.